Hello, Exeter. I am your host, Garrett Prey, and today on People of Exeter, I have two very special guests today.
Adam Collins, so showed up, and then after that, I bent over.
Pleasure to have you on show one. The both of you are here for a very special reason. You have a mutual bond with your father, who was an incredible archives man. He filmed a lot throughout the decades of Exeter, which I'm excited to hear about because I've seen some of his footage here. Not all of it, but some. And before we get into that, let's start with first just getting to know the both of you just a little bit, and then we'll talk about the man himself.
Okay. Well, big picture, Mary and Ben Swiezynski married in 1946, and in 47, 48, and 49, bang, 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 they had 3 girls. Mm-hmm. And then 52. Sorry, I gave away your age.
That's okay.
It's in the high school year.
They never would have thought it anyway.
But anyway, so I came along in 52, and then there was the other family, which was our brother Skip, Ben III, in 1959. So myself went to school here in Exeter, Exeter Day School, St. Michael's School for grammar school, and then what was then the junior high in the Tuck School on Linden Street, and then Phillips Exeter, UNH, and that was the end of my life as a resident in Exeter. Moved to Massachusetts and have lived in Wilmington, Massachusetts since 1977. I've had 2 sons who have their own families in St. Louis and Middleton, Mass. And I worked for various small companies over the years, and retired in what was it? No, it was 2019. And here I am today.
All right. And so, Sandy, let's get to you.
Okay. Well, when Jim was talking, all I could think of was how our family has been here for over 100 years. And, it goes back to Dad having graduated here in 1934. But, again, I went to the Exeter Day School, St. Michael's up until the 8th grade. St. Michael's is now Main Street School. But if you, this is a little, some people don't know this, but if you look carefully on the top of Main Street School, you can still see the crosses from St. Michael's up there that they never took them down. Went to Exeter High School, graduated in '67. Loved Exeter High School. I loved my years there, and then married, children, worked in the 70s. I had a 10-year career in banking, and then I switched and worked at Exeter High School. Retired after 30 years in 2015. Made a short trip to Arizona for about a year, came back, and back to Exeter. Still here.
All right.
Born and still here.
That's exciting. It's great when there's a town that keeps people here because the community is that good.
Well, we've, and our siblings had their stints moving away and then back again as well. Even our sister Cass, who ran the shop for a number of years, Exeter draws you back in. I'm not there yet, but...
Will be, though. It's calling for you. But that's exciting, though. And so, before we get into your father, how about just give a little sense of what the community was like during that time?
I don't know where to start, but I think the older you get, the memories come clearer to you of the past. And so we still have, the homestead is still on Winter Street in Exeter, and go by it, and I can still remember the times playing out in the yard. As a kid, we had the playground in Exeter, which is not there anymore. It was at Robinson Seminary, which has burnt. But It was a very close-knit community. Traffic, nothing like it is today. You knew everybody, and everybody knew you. Especially where your dad had a business in downtown Exeter. You know, one of my parents' famous lines was, "No matter what you do, I will find out." And they did. So you had to be on your best behavior all the time. But I still have friends that have moved away, or some are still here from my childhood, that still talk about Exeter and still attend our class reunions. We had our 50th a few years ago, and they come back here to Exeter to celebrate their reunions. So.
Well, in the 50s and 60s especially, you talk about tight-knit. Everyone worked in town. For instance, our grandparents both worked at the Old Wise Shoe Company, and it's now loft apartments and condominiums. That's on Front Street where the railroad tracks cross. And they lived in Carroll, where my dad and his brother grew up as well, and they walked to work for 20 plus 30 years to work in the shoe shop. There were a lot of our grandparents, our grandfather and my dad's side was first generation born in this country. My grandmother, our grandmother, emigrated from Poland in 1905, I think it was. So there were still ties to the old country, but I think one of the most interesting thing was that the people were very interested in being Americans. And that's not a political statement, but you didn't hear an awful lot from them about what went on in the old country. They shared it with their own friends, like there was a Polish club, there was an Italian club. We even had our own supermarkets down the street from us, right on the corner of Front Street and Washington Street. We called it Krasewski's. It was known as Stanley's, but that's where all the Polish folks went to shop. And up the block was Binet's, and that's where the French went. Over on Front Street, there was Poggio's store, and these, this was before. There was a supermarket that crept in downtown, but you did most of your shopping right down the street. And I remember as I was probably about 8. Please, no reflection on my parents, but you could go down there and you could buy beer and cigarettes for your parents and bring them back home. No questions asked.
Yeah, it was back in the day when they'd give you the money for it and they'd trust you with it too.
Yep. That they knew how much it was going to cost and how much I should come back home with.
Yeah.
But there was. I don't know if that would have happened if I went to any place else, but certainly they took care of you.
So let's talk about your guys' father. So what did he do? Who was he?
You can start with.
Well,
wasn't he born on Washington Street, as the story goes? And
that I thought. Well, I don't know exactly where he was born. It was Exeter. I mean, every Swiezynski was born in Exeter, starting with my dad's generation, and my mother our mother as well. So they grew up. He grew up on Carroll Street, as I mentioned, which is just off Front Street, down and right, hop, step, and jump from where we grew up on Winter Street. He had a younger brother, Joe. He was born in 1916. Joe was born in 1920. And he went to school through Exeter. He went to the Winter Street School it was different things in later years, but it was 2 doors down from where we grew up. It was never a school when we were there. It was the Knights of Columbus when we were there and became other things over the years. So we went to school there, eventually graduating from Exeter High School in 1934, which was, again, in the Tuck building on Linden Street, which was the high school for boys. The women went to the Robinson Seminary, which is on the lot near where the Little League field is now. During his high school years, he worked in probably different jobs, but a print shop sort of stuck with him. And in all this time, he was developing an interest in what would become a passion for film. So by 1938, he had founded New England Movie Productions, which was all up here at this point, except he owned a 16 millimeter camera. And as he could afford it and saw something interesting, he would film things in the community. He was filming his family and races up in Epping, the aftermath of the hurricane of 1938, and the damage that it did. Prior to that, he was also working in he worked at the Hampton Union and the Portsmouth Herald, and he was in their different jobs, but mostly he wound up being a Linotype operator. And you talk about old technology, Linotype was the process to create the type that would be used to print newspapers, where you would hack away, and he never got away from the finger, 2 fingers, like I do. And each time you hit a key, a machine would create a metal slug, which would be corresponding to that letter. So you had to be pretty accurate because there was no autocorrect for something like that, and there were deadlines. So you had to be really good at your job. And so this metal slug would be put into a giant a tray, which was the size of the printed page. And so as he would get the copy from the editor, he would then type in that information. So he's got printer's ink in his veins. Then I'll keep going. World War II came along. In 1942, he and his brother both volunteered. Joe went into the Navy, served in the Mediterranean Theater, and won a Purple Heart, earned a Purple Heart. Dad he was interested in becoming a sort of a war correspondent and film wartime, which I'm sure there are a number of people who are very happy that didn't happen. They had all they needed. So he went into the Signal Corps, which was basically communications. And he was teaching people how to read maps or something like that. Applied from Officers Candidate School. He called it, and it was a term used back then, a 90-day wonder. You were getting commissioned very quickly back in those days. I mean, they needed people out there on the line.
90 days is your deadline.
Yep. Whatever you were after 90 days, you were a second lieutenant, and they're sending you off wherever they need you. During that same time, he applied to become a pilot, and he was accepted to that. And a little fuzzy on the different locations. It's not all written down in a book I can refer to. I'm piecing it together. Mm-hmm. And he trained on single-engine planes and so forth. And eventually, they were looking for pilots for B-24s, which was a bomber that was being used towards the middle and the latter part of the war. So he signed up for that, got his wings. Never told his parents about it, and they found out when he came home on leave one time that he had gotten his pilot's certification. After that, he was out, I think it was Texas and Kansas, to learn how to fly B-24s. They sent him off to the Pacific Theater, where he was based out of India, and his job was to fly. And let's see, he was at 42? He got over there probably in early 45. So he was 29 years old. So he was an old-timer as far as pilots went. Fortunately for him, they wanted the young ones in the combat flying. So he was flying gasoline that was being used by the Chinese and American troops stationed over there. And he would fly the hump, which was the Himalayas. And he made, we're not sure if it was 57 or 58 times. I suppose, he used to say 57 because he said they called him the Heinz boy, because the slogan for Heinz ketchup was Heinz was 57 varieties. So that was the story he used to tell us. If you read what came later on, it was 58. So I was thinking, well, if you're going back and forth, you have to have an even number of flights in order to get back where you started. So it's probably 58. Anyway, he and his crew got the award for the most gasoline flown. So troop ship comes back home. He comes back home on a troop ship and reestablished himself in Exeter. Reestablishes connection with our mother, who he had met prior to World War II, but he was not, knowing that the war was ahead, he wasn't going to get in any family situation. But he was interested. He came back. They got married in '46 and resumed New England movie productions, which for Dad became less about movies. That was more of a hobby, and then it was still photography that he would do. And New England Movie Productions gave birth to Ben's Photo Shop, which started at 83 Winter Street, which is our residence where we kids grew up and the family home. And they ran the store out of the living room. Now, my mother was also involved with this because at that time, the three girls were in diapers. And while Dad was out maybe taking, his photography would consist of weddings, portraits, and he always had his camera in the car. If he saw something he thought was newsworthy, he would take a picture and see if they were interested down at the newsletter to see if they wanted to publish it. So Dad was selling photo supplies and photo processing out of the living room. And our mother did the books. She was a bookkeeper prior to moving back home to start the family. And so, when she wasn't doing homemaker stuff, she was keeping my dad's life organized. He just went out and did his thing, and she was responsible for maintaining the order. And so she kicked him out, I guess, somewhere around 1955, and started the business in downtown Exeter. He took a small shop on the Town Hall side of Water Street, 132, I think it was. He actually wound up having 2 slots in there. It was the old Goodwin block, which is whatever it is over there now. It went through different changes over the years. But that's where he started and got the shop set up. And at that point, he needed help in the store because his business, the weddings and he would do in-home family portraits and that sort of thing, was keeping him pretty busy. All at the same time, he was maintaining a position in the Air Force Reserves. So after the war, he stayed with it. It was it was the Army Air Corps during the war, and after that, it became the U.S. Air Force. And so he trained to fly there, and eventually he retired from the service, the reserves in 1966. But he was away, at least once a weekend, and flying out of Grenier Field and Hanscom Air Force Base. Grenier Field being where the Manchester Airport is now. It was a military base, and then Hanscom was down in Bedford. And I'm doing all the talking here.
Oh, you're doing very well.
All right. You all with me still?
I'm with, oh, yeah.
To develop the rest of his business and all his community activities, which, you know, had something to do with film, always had something to do with film, but also his love of the town of Exeter and people, particularly children and their education. Dad, he finally did retire, but all that time, he was filming stuff. And again, a lot of it was still film. And when we Mom passed away in 2002, Dad passed away in 2007. And so in the process of dealing with the estate, we also dealt with 60 years of Dad's film career, which was not neatly categorized. And it was organized to some extent, and it was in the basement, it was in the garage. He did have a pretty good system of his 4x5 films, and things were documented, you know, the month, the date, and who the subject was in there. By my quick estimation, looking at the two bookcase full of these, of the negatives, I would say, I guessed that there were about in the neighborhood of 30,000 individual photographs he took, not 30,000 different subjects, because he never took just one picture. The minimum he would take is two, and often it was a number more. So that went from that house to storage up in New Hampshire to my basement, and I said, well, I'll deal with this when I retire. So what was that, 12 years? So I started digging into it in 2019, and it's been a lot of fun to go through all of that. And I've categorized it, and Sandy's been a big help with this too. She helps between. Dad never threw any print away, even if it was a bad one. I would find it. We would find it in a box somewhere. It might be all curled up or whatever, but it wasn't what eventually was given to the customer. It was there, and so if we found something we thought might be interesting to somebody, we got on it to try to connect them. We've been able to do that with a lot of people. COVID came in, and it's been harder to meet with people, but we're still looking at getting together with St. Michael's, where he did an awful lot of work. He did a lot of pro bono work over the years. I used to say you gave away half your business, and he says, nah, I got it all back. And he wasn't interested in living in a mansion. And he was happy with what he did. So I'm going to stop right now.
Well, I think you covered everything.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Well,
wow.
Sandy, it's interesting to see, to hear about all this work that your father covered. How about give me a little sense of what he was like? I mean, he held on to clearly a lot of his work. 30,000 photos you guys are going through. Was he like that with everything? Did he hold on to a lot of things? Did he collect a lot?
It took us 2 years to clean the house after Mom and Dad passed away and Cass passed away. It took us 2 years between the attic and the basement. Did they hold on? Yeah, they did. And I think that was that generation. Cleaning out all those things, they were they didn't talk politics, finances, or anything like that. It was just all for the day, for everyday things that are going on, whether it be our basketball games, our football games, our schooling, whatever. So when we went, I didn't know a lot about my mom's mom, and she passed away just before my mom graduated from high school. So when we were going through all the paperwork and letters that we found in the attic, is when we really found out a little more about our parents. The side that we didn't really know about them. So, yeah, I don't know. There, and you know, and my mom. I mean, she was just always there for us when it comes to Mom. Whether it be, you know, come in the afternoon and have some cheese and crackers and just watch the traffic go by, or as we got older, always there for the grandchildren, always there for them. And then, you know, you'd sit on the porch, and because they had a beautiful screened-in porch on Winter Street, and then here comes Dad. Here, you can see him coming around the corner in his signature station wagon that he had every single year. And Dad would come home and, you know, just sit down on the porch and talk about the day. And, but yeah, you know, you couldn't ask for better parents, you know, and being brought up in Exeter, and just really close family growing up, very close Catholic family growing up. And, you know, he was there for the children in the community, because he did put on Halloween shows here in the town hall. He would put on shows. He also he had Merrill lectures that went on here for the community. So he was all about the community, all about giving back, and that's one thing that our parents taught us is giving back, which I try to live by every day.
A very personal or sentimental thing for him to go ahead and do this. Like, every photo was something he studied. Was every film something he would, you know, he would obsess over inch by inch everything he did. Did you really know that side of him as an artist?
New England movie productions was something of a dream. I don't think he was quite Hollywood, but he made some, like he did a safety film one year for Exeter and Hampton Electric, which was Unitil now. And so he was looking for gigs like that, if he could get them. But on the film side, it was mostly home movies. You know, every family event was filmed. Christmases was a very it was very orchestrated.
That was going to be my next question. Did he stage it?
Oh gosh.
Oh yeah. The lights,
Yeah. And we had to
Sweating.
march in, and
Oh yeah.
yeah. So we did all of that, and you know, it was hard to get him to get on the other side of the camera. You know, he would, because he another part of him, he was in some ways sort of shy. He didn't really want the attention, or let's say credit, directed towards him for whatever it might be. But he also didn't mind standing up in front of a crowd and entertaining them or informing them, if, you know, depending on what the situation was. He was in demand as an after-dinner speaker. He did a lot with Boosters Club. It was an annual event for him to speak at the Exeter High School football banquets, tell the same jokes every year, and they loved him, you know.
He was a guest speaker at my son. His first grandchild was my son, and he graduated in 1989. And my dad was the guest speaker at graduation that year, and surprised him. I believe it was 89. But anyway, surprised my son and gave him his diploma in 1967 when Dad was on the school board, and he was on the school board of Exeter for 20-something
24 years.
Yeah. He gave me my diploma back in 1967, so we wanted to repeat history. We're sort of, yeah, that's us.
Well, kind of back to your question, he did a humorous documentary from which was, there was some production involved with it because he was titling his home movies back in the day too. You'd set up a screen and film the screen and superimpose it. There were no green screens or whatever. He would make it work however you do it in black and white. And so it's actually a pretty funny video of what a humorous look at basic training. Back in 1942. In later years, it was all about recording the moment. And I'm sure in his own way, he said, I'm going to get to this someday, and it will be organized. And that's what I keep telling myself now because I inherited that job. I don't think he knew he was commercial in the work that he did, and it put the food on the table and so forth. So he was very, in looking at the pictures he took, giving the tools he had to work with. In some cases, he would literally set up a screen in the shop before he had his studio with a white background and shoot someone's portrait, passports. Photos before you could do it with your iPhone. He did a nice business of people who would travel and need the passport identification, so they would sit with him. So that was his film career later on. And as he got into his 80s, he wasn't, he turned off the police radio, so he didn't hear if there was something that was newsworthy that might be worth photographing. But our sister Cass took over that job, but there wasn't a family event or a family get-together that wasn't recorded on film.
Or was that just like a community mentality back then where people decided, hey, we have to invest or do this?
After the war was over, the soldiers came back. Families got started again. Babies were being made. Schools needed to be built. You needed a downtown area. There were no malls or whatever back then, so you needed all the support. The shoe stores, the clothing stores, the curtain shop. All of that was rebuilt by those people, and it really was. You look at the Exeter newsletter from that time. It was all about. It was the Facebook of the time, right? The announcements, the birth announcements that were in there, the wedding announcements, and people, because there wasn't all that much of an outside world, right? Your television stations, you got, around here we got 4, 5, and 7 in the UHF. There was no cable or anything like that.
No remotes. Neighborhoods were more important. You knew your neighbors more closely.
Do you think that going out there and experiencing the war had an impact on their investment into the community as well?
Sure, you got that one.
Really? Well, that's an easy one, right? Mm-hmm. They saw what the country was fighting at the time, which was the opposite of what they grew up with and what they wanted the future to be like. So, no, they didn't talk an awful lot about the old days. You'd pick up sort of innuendo here and there, but they didn't wear that time on their sleeve. It was a job to do, right? That's it's a cliche, but it is true. It is true. They say, that part of our life. Now we need to move on. The hidden scars, they didn't call it PTSD back then, but there were those out there, and you knew who they were in the community, and they were treated with respect and deference, but you as a parent would worry about your family and the rest of the community.
Yeah. Now, thank you for the interview. However, is there any last words or anything you'd like to share before going? Because I think we're reaching our time now.
Oh, I think Jim did a terrific job. His memory is far better than mine, but I just, what do I want to share? Giving back. You know, like we did, you know, in this community, in this town years ago, and just giving back and helping one another. And I think sometimes that gets lost, you know, and I don't know, that's what I think.
Should I ask more questions?
Yeah.
Trying to piece together so much
Yeah.
about our family. But one of the things about the people, I mentioned this before, that, you know, my father's parents' generation, they very much wanted to be Americans. Not that they didn't like where they came from or where their roots were, but at that time, we wanted to assimilate and be part of this great country that it's become. But that led to, you know, the sort of either there was nothing to brag about, we had other things to do at the time. You know, life happens, right? And, you know, we were young. I mean, we were just kids. We were, you know, out there playing with frogs and stuff. And you know, you don't think about your family legacy. And I wish I had a better handle on that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
You heard it, Exeter. If you would like to be in the spotlight and share your story or someone else's story, feel free to contact us at extvg@exeternh.gov. Thank you, and have a great day.
Years ago, because I was telling my granddaughter this, they did birth announcements. And she said, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, when people have babies, they used to tell the community, whether in a card form or it would be put in the newspaper." Did you know that?
No, but that's kind of interesting now.
Right. Well, you're going to see my birth announcement, and it's staged.
Wait a second.
Well, sort of. It was, well, so, did I say that wrong? So anyway, there's a picture of Dad. Well, you're going to see the birth announcement. There's a picture of Dad, and it's this.
I'd like it added to the blooper reel.
And yeah, that did come out wrong, didn't it?
No, it came out perfect.